Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Potential State. I'm Dr. Estelle Romanelli, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about emotional bids and why they are the cure or the energy or the drive or the secret technique or concept or theory that can help you improve your personal and professional relationships. So, and then I'm going to use examples as well to give you guys examples and connect that to the world of improv, of theater improv. So emotional bids the concept of it was developed by John Gottman in his amazing book, The Relationship Cure. You're all welcome to read that. It's a wonderful book. And he and his wife have been researching couples in the Love Lab in Seattle for over 40 years. And they have a lot of interesting theories and concepts, which I'll talk about later. But they have this idea of emotional bids, which means underneath every concrete interactions we have with other people, there's an emotional bid that's underneath, which means I'm afraid of being hurt. I'm afraid of being rejected. So instead of saying, I miss you, I'm going to say something like, why'd you come home so late? You promised you'd come home at 8 o'clock at night. So he calls that emotional bids. And then if you think about it, in theater improv, we call bids also offers. What we do on stage. Anything I do on stage is an offer or a bid. So I'm going to be going back and forth from couples therapy to theater improvisation about this concept of bids. So he talks about an emotional bid, and he says there are 3 ways that we can react to an emotional bid. Okay, so for every interaction, we're throwing to each other tons of concrete offers, communications, requests, statements, and we're actually throwing tons of emotional bids underneath. So we'll give the classic example. The wife comes home late from work. The husband's exhausted, and he tells her, why are you coming home right now? You promised you'd come home at 8 o'clock, okay? At 6 o'clock, and now it's 8. Okay, so he's actually attacking her. But the emotional bid underneath could be I was lonely, could be I felt alone, could be I felt unsupported, unseen, etc., etc., etc. So Gottman says there are 3 ways we can react to that. The wife can go away from the bid, which basically means ignoring the bid. So he'll say, now you come home, you promised you'd come home at 6 o'clock. So she can say, what's for dinner? Or she can say, how was bedtime with the kids? She can completely ignore that bid and go a different direction. That's one. She can go against the bid, which means that's really because you were home late all week last week, you were late, and that's really horrible. So don't come talking to me about being late. You didn't even come back home last night after the game. You went with your friends, you came home only after you fell asleep. Okay? So those 2 are very clear. And then the 3rd way is going towards. Now, this is interesting about going towards the emotional bid doesn't necessarily mean going toward the concrete statement. So an example of going toward the bid would be like, yeah, I'm sorry, you probably felt really alone, or it's not easy being alone with the kids, I know. So if you think about it, going towards the bid is the partner saying, I hear what you were wanting. I heard your embedded emotional request, and I'm going towards it. And that takes an ear to hear it, courage to say yes to it, and kind of a habit of doing that. Now, if we compare this to improv, the first rule of improv is yes and, right? Is accept and build. So if someone says to me on stage, hey, Grandma, thanks for coming, the first thing I'm going to say is, great to see you, grandson. I brought you some cookies, right? That's called accepting the bid, right? Or going towards, if you want to use couples therapy language. And the opposite of that in improv is blocking. Hey, Grandma, thanks for coming. So I can either say, I'm not your grandma, I'm your girlfriend. Did you forget? Okay. Or, so it's negating the partner's reality, which actually also Gottman would say that's going against the bid, okay? Or I can stall. So in improv blocking, when I'm stalling action, it's blocking. It's a sense of blocking. Or when I'm not listening. So for example, someone says to me on stage, let's rob a bank, and I say, wait, where's my gun? I'm actually blocking him. I'm actually not saying yes, and I'm not going toward that bid. So I'm going to come back to that in a little bit later. So there's going away from the bid, which is ignoring, going against, which is fighting, and going towards, which means kind of going towards my partner, leaning in toward him or her. So when they research couples, they realize that couples in intimate relationships have kind of patterns. The couples that go against each other, the couples that go away from each other, and the couples that go toward each other. So when you research which couples divorce fastest, he discovered that actually the couples go away from, which is interesting because you'd think it would be the against, right? Because they're fighting all the time. But the going away from each other's bids actually makes bidding less and less frequent, because if he's not even ignoring, if he's not even like fighting me or resisting me, then I'm going to stop bidding. So I slowly stop bidding. And these relationships just tend to like dissolve, whether it's divorce, whether it's workplace, friendships, parent-child interactions. So he will say in his research and in his therapeutic approach, their therapeutic, which is based on his research, they say you need to reach a ratio of 5 to 1, going towards 5, going towards bids for each one that I go against or away, because it's impossible to always go toward each other's bids. So they say if you want to have a healthy relationship, colleagues, parents, loved ones, whatever, friends, I need to make sure I'm between 5 and 7 going towards to each one that I'm going away or against. That's a nice number to aspire to. It's not that easy. I think what I want to say is, like, throughout my experience, since I've learned this technique and obviously applied it, trying to apply it in my marriage, and I'll give you guys a few examples from my personal life as well. It's really, it kind of stays there, this 5 to 1, or a lot of times I'll say, we want to have a pool of yeses, like a whole blanket of yeses. So when the no comes, it's not that dramatic because there's so many yeses. Like when we build a scene in improvisation, we first start with a lot of yeses, and then when the no comes, and inevitably it's going to come, there's enough yeses to let that scene develop, to let that no be digested and not be it the thing that's going to break up the relationship or break up the scene. So that's the concept of emotional bids. And now I want to give you a few examples, and then I'm going to actually give you some tips or how to do this or how to implement that. And obviously, feel free to ask me any question you want. So I wanted to give you, first of all, examples of a way I have tons, right? They happen all the time where I just ignore bids. My kids ask me for something, I don't ignore it. Or I come home and and my wife says something and I just don't listen to that. Or I ever ask her what's for dinner or whatever. So a way I feel is perhaps it's easier to fathom, but I want to give examples that I went against, that I saw and against. This is coming from a session and in a couple therapy session a few months back. This husband really wanted his wife to open up more and to share more. He feels like she's closed. We call this the pursuer-distancer syndrome, dance, and I'm going to talk about that in a different talk. And that's what he kept saying. My wife's not saying anything. My wife's not saying anything. And then I taught him this terminology. Almost in every single couple or individual I work with, I always give this concept sooner or later. And at the end, she shared how lonely she's feeling. It was a very clear emotional bid. And the first thing he said was, you think you're the only one that's lonely? I'm also lonely. I've been lonely for years, And then I stopped him and I said, did you go toward, away, or against from her bid? And he said, I went against. Now, why did he do that? Because they have a culture of going against each other's bids. This is not the couple that goes away and there's just quiet. When one of them bids for anything, could you make me dinner, or which restaurant should we go to? The other one always goes against it. It becomes like a fight because that's the energy that they have. That also explains why they're so many years together, right? I'm reminding you, the against each other's bids stay longer than the going away. So he says that, and then he clocks that he actually went against his wife's emotional bid. And for a moment there, we just let that sink. We just let that realize that I want to get closer, but I'm going against. And what's interesting, he had this moment when he realized that. And I didn't have to give him the whole speech about 5 to 1, go more yeses. I think it was a visceral moment where he felt that. He felt this pattern of going against each other's bids and the damage it causes. Because right after he said that, even though we clocked it, she said, I feel really, really far away from you now. So the result of going against each other's bids is people feeling far away. And paradoxically, by going against, at least they're getting attention. So at least you're seeing me, at least you're fighting me, at least you're not ignoring me, right? Which will encourage more bids, but it creates an atmosphere of going against each other's bids. So that was an example of going against. Now I want to give you a few examples of going towards. I'll give you one from the clinic and one from my life. I'll start with the clinic. So in my clinic, as you can see behind me, there are books. lots of books. All these books are like the books that are my co-therapists, all these ideas and amazing, brilliant people from all over the world, mostly improv and psychotherapy. And the clients used to I would sit on this side and they would sit with their back to the books. And on the other side of the wall, you can't see this, is an abstract modern painting that every therapist has in their clinic, right? It's projectable, but it's serious. It's somewhere in the middle there. And he said to me, after about 9 months, he said to me, do you mind if we switch no, he didn't even ask. He said something like, I didn't realize there were books behind me. I never thought about it. I've actually realized there are a lot of books behind me now. At that moment, I didn't clock it. And only after the session was over, I realized that what he was saying is, or what I chose to hear, or my interpretation is, I want to see more of you. I want to see the books. I want to see the richness. I want to see the color and creativity of you. Stop giving me the sterile picture, but in fact, give me something that's a bit more exposed, because my books are me. My books are the theories. My books are the giants that I'm sitting on their shoulder. And he wanted to see that. He wanted to see a different part of me. And at the time, as a young therapist, I said, whoa, but that's the setting. We're going to switch the session. So the next client that came in the following day, I made them sit perpendicular to the books. So they could still see me on this whiteboard, obviously, which I use all the time, but they got to see the books. And then since then, the books have become such a big part of my work. People look at the books, they ask me, I lend them out to clients. I really believe that knowledge is power. So it's not about holding the power, it's about giving it away and making people the experts in themselves. And I went toward that emotional bid. Now, in this case, I went not only toward the emotional bid, but I also went toward the concrete request. He didn't really request it, but this was a case of I went toward the emotional bid and I kind of reacted to the concrete that he said. I want to give you an example, which is a bit harder, of going toward the bid and saying no to the concrete offer. And I want to give two examples, one from personal, one from a professional. I'll start with the personal. So my wife came back after a week abroad and she told me that she got a babysitter for Saturday night, so we can go out, just the two of us. Now, I was exhausted. I haven't seen her in a week. It was just not, I was not there. But it was clear to me that that's an emotional bid. The emotional bid is, let's be together. This is important. And when she asked me that, I was really mindful of how am I going to react to that? How can I go toward her bid of being together, but say no to the actual logistical comment of let's go out and go for dinner or a movie? And I was exhausted. So I ended up saying something like, thank you so much for ordering this, for ordering her and surprising me, or for telling me that you were going to surprise me. And let's just stay home. Let's be together. Let's connect. Let's pop open a bottle of wine. Let's talk. And I think she took that really well. She actually felt validated. And then she said, the truth is, I didn't want to go out either, but I kind of thought it would be fun. And the truth is, I'd rather stay at home with you. So I think this is an example, because people always equate of going toward, 5 to 1. They're saying yes to whatever my partner says, but that's not true. And I want to give a different example, which was actually a harder one. Different client of mine, when people come into the room, I stand up. That's the way I greet people, not just in the clinic, everywhere. I've learned that from my dad. And after a few months, she says to me, please don't stand up. It stresses me out. And I stayed with that and I listened to it. And I was really thinking about that afterwards. What does that mean? Does that mean that she's feeling threatened, that she needs control, that she wants to feel like she can have it the way that she's comfortable with? And when I was thinking about it, I realized that if I go toward that concrete bid, it wouldn't be precise for me. I'm relating back to the anger, saying no to someone else and saying yes to myself. It was clear to me that if I greet her sitting down, that's not going to be my authentic self. That's not going to be where I can be authentic and therefore help her be more authentic. So the following week, I stood up when she came, and she came in and she said, I asked you. And I said, I know you asked me. And I thought about it a lot. And I want to find a way for you to feel more safe or seen or controlled. And I want to find a way that I can also be there with you and not just kind of be an object that you can kind of curate me or choreograph me. And that did create a rupture, that did create like a tension between us. But I think in the long run, she respected that. She respected the fact that I saw her and I was also myself. We call this differentiation. Being myself and also being close to someone else. It's not an either or. It's not either doing what she says and then ignoring the fact that that's not how I feel authentic. And it wasn't like, this is how I do it and you just got to deal with it. It was fine. It was going toward her emotional bid. And I think looking back, I want to give that as an example of going toward her bid, but not going toward her concrete offer or request. So I was asking, having trouble understanding the difference between against and away. So away is ignoring the emotional bid. So I'll give another example. The wife says, let's go on vacation. There's an amazing, I just saw this ad, there's really cheap flights to whatever, to Thailand, okay? The emotional bit is, I want adventure, I want time alone, I want to be celebrated, I want us to celebrate ourselves, whatever. I can go away from it by saying, what's for dinner? Or who's dropping off the kids tomorrow, remind me? It's like I'm ignoring that bid. I'm ignoring the emotional bid. Or I could say, oh, give me that newspaper, and then I'm flipping through and looking at the sports. That's going away from the bid. Okay, I'm not fighting it. I'm not going toward it. I'm just kind of, whatever. It's like lingering over there, but I went somewhere else. Doesn't have to be, it's not necessarily aggressive, or it can be mindless if I didn't even notice. But that's going away. Going against is, whether it's consciously, semi-consciously, or unconsciously, I'm going against that emotional bid. For instance, vacation, really, now? You know, we barely have time. We barely see each other. We don't have enough money or whatever other reasons. You know, that's really funny because when I wanted to do something like that, you said, you'd rather go and with your girlfriends. And now you're someone saying vacation, okay? So actually, I'm not ignoring it. I'm going against it. I'm like going in it. And once again, that's the paradoxical nature of these bids. If when I go against, on one hand, I create a negative atmosphere, but I encourage more bidding because I am giving negative attention, as Adler says, right? Positive attention, hugging, kissing, questions. Negative attention is yelling, hitting, scolding, punishing. That's still negative attention. We're all animals of attention. So by going against the bid, I'm actually giving negative attention, and that encourages more bidding. But it's the wrong kind of bidding because people make more and more, the less safe I feel, the more my bids are more distant, are more concrete. So instead of saying, I want to go on vacation with you, I'm going to do really around the corner because that's interesting. Flights to Thailand. Or, you know, you won't believe this, but Danny took his wife last week to the Caribbeans. And then I can ignore that and say, oh, that's nice. Or I can go, oh, yeah? Another thing I'm not doing wrong. And Danny, why don't you go with Danny? If he's okay. So it's interesting if you think about it, reflect on your own relationships, not just your marriage, but your interactions. Notice, are you going more towards, against, or away? And there's one more concept I want to bring in here, and then I'm going to give a little bit of tips how to do it at home or in your workplace. There's another concept called repair attempt. It's also from the book. I'm going to talk about the couples that start negatively and they kind of spiral into a fight. Okay, the person went against to it. The couples that are happy they're able to do a repair attempt. Somewhere as the snowball is starting to get bigger and bigger, one of them can do a repair attempt. They can do something that kind of breaks that energy. Something silly, something playful, something honest, change of the context. And if couples can not only initiate that, but go toward that bid, then that kind of redirects that from a fight into a more playful space or a growth space to an honest conversation. I'll give an example. I'm having a fight, I'm having an argument, and suddenly my wife will go like a funny face, or like do a cute little or something like that, or even on the nose. Okay, so if I was really in red and trauma mind, right, I would be insulted and hurt, offended by that. But since the snowball just started, I suddenly laughed because suddenly she said, "Hey, didn't mean to go that far. Let's go back into play." And most of the times, I'll ignore that. I'll even go against. I'll say, "Stop being silly. I'm serious about this." But from time to time, when I'm conscious enough, when I'm solid enough, I can actually go toward that repair attempt and go toward that emotional bit and saying, this, or like laugh again. But then I can also say, I see that you want to end this, but I just really want you to hear this point. So even by going toward the repair attempt does not mean that I have to drop my case, drop my anger, ignore what I'm feeling. But it's once again going toward her. So if there are not any other questions, I'm going to go to a few tips, what you can do. So the first thing I want to suggest to all of you is teach the people around you this language. Because once you have emotional bids, it's a bid going toward, against, away. Once you have this in the language of the organization, the culture, the family, the marriage, then we can actually call it what it is. So for instance, retrospectively, every day, think of one interaction. What was the emotional bit of that person? You won't be able to clock all of them all the time, obviously, but choose one relationship that you want to kind of improve. One relationship that you feel like you want to get a bit warmer, a bit more close, a bit more intimate, a bit more collaborative. What was an emotional bit that they did this today? Whether it was, hey, I've got some free time, I want to grab lunch, or to something smaller or something bigger. And then realize, did I go away, against, or toward that bit? And just write that down. And just notice as you're reflecting on that relationship, is that a relationship? Do I usually go away from that person or against that person? What usually happens there? That's the first thing. The second thing I want to suggest to you is clarify your bids. So for instance, if I'm getting upset that I'm talking to my wife and she's answering her phone and she's WhatsApping or using her phone or looking at Facebook or whatever, I can get angry at her, or I can clarify my bid and say, listen, I really want you to look at me. I really want to feel seen. I've had a horrible day. I just need you to be with me for a second. I'm clarifying my bids. And if she doesn't see it, or if she doesn't hear it, or if she goes against, I can say, listen, I just bid it. And then once we have this language, I can say, well, you're going against my bid. And she can own it. She can say, yeah, I can go against the bid. Like that the man did to her wife. He owned it. All right. And then after that, you can choose, well, am I angry enough that I can't go toward that bid? Or actually, you're right. Sorry, let's try this again. Me and Gilly, we call it a take two. All right, sorry, I went against the bid. Let's try this again. Rewind. But for that, we need to have play and potential state. I'm reminding you of the previous video. Feel free to check it out and listen to it on the podcast as well. The third thing I want to suggest is own the moments where you go away or against. Do not pretend that you're always going toward the bids, because that's not realistic. When you get called on it, or when you realize you did it, owned it. Say, you know what? I went against that bid. You wanted something and I just completely got triggered and I got all angry at you, and you're right. I'm sorry. Or I don't have energy. I didn't have energy to listen to that even, so I went away from it. The more you'll be able to own it and to call yourself on it, the more that's actually, ironically, that's going towards. Because the more I own my stuff, or I call it ownership. Like ownership, but with a SHIT in the end. I'm actually calling myself out. And when I call myself out, I'm calling myself out because I want to be closer to you. So by owning the fact that I went against your bid earlier at dinner, or earlier at the meeting, or earlier at the lunch date that we had, I'm actually going towards you because I'm saying, I'm sorry, I'm realizing that I could have done it differently. I care. I want to improve. I'm conscious about this relationship. This relationship matters to me. That's the emotional bid of calling yourself out. So by calling yourself out, you're actually putting out a new emotional bid. Now, it's possible that the person you're with, who's already used to going against your way, might go against that bid. Might say, oh yeah, you're really sorry. I can see it in your face. I'm really sorry. But if you'll be able to be strong enough and say, yeah, I am. And even if they go against, you can still stay steady there. And even if they go against your way, if you really are conscious and you want to change that environment, change that dynamic, what Gottman calls the relationship cure, then do it. And the last thing I'd like kind of suggesting is just have that idea of the 5-to-1 or the 7-to-1, saying a lot of yeses, saying a lot of yes ands, knowing that there's going to be a no, there's going to be an against, there's going to be an away. But if I can consciously try to like deposit a lot of yeses, and then slowly, it's the environment, the atmosphere is going to open up. And when I go against or away, or when he or she go against or away, it won't break. It won't be so dramatic. It won't be a world war. It's just going to be another rupture in a series of ruptures and repairs. That's a concept we'll talk about it in another talk. So if to sum this up, I would say any relationship you can improve if you want to. And I guess the building blocks of the relationships, of any relationship, are emotional bids, from past the salt to I love you and everything in the middle. And at any given moment, you can choose to change the culture of that relationship, to start going more towards, or choose to go more against in a way, and then know that you're ending the relationship. And I guess this whole line, which I always want to encourage you guys, is call yourself on your own stuff. The more you call yourself on it, not only do you build integrity with yourself, but you're modeling a more honest interactions. And you're actually, it's connecting also to the idea of potential state, because you're stepping into play. Because the second I'm calling myself on something that I did, even that I'm not proud of, I'm actually saying to my partner, I'm not perfect, but I'm willing to show you. And if I'm willing to show you, that means I care. And if I care, that means I'm investing in this energy, in this interaction. And that, I think, is an idea that's worth spreading. So I've been Asel Romanelli, and this was The Potential State, and I'll see you all next time.